You want to make one of these? Here's a tutorial. For the base, I use 1-inch foam. Measure all the way around your head, then add like 5 more inches. Then measure from the bottom of your chin to the top of your head. For me, it's usually around a foot, then I just work from there. Cat. Now cut it out of foam. Then hot glue the two ends together. Now you have a tube. Measure the inside of the tube and find the halfway point. Now measure that halfway point all the way around the side. Now you should have a line. Now measure equal distant marks around the line. I try to aim for 10 spaces. Now find the midpoint between those two marks, mark it at the top, and make a triangle. Do that along the entire thing. Yay, triangles! Now cut off the top ones. It should look kinda like a crown, then glue the triangles together. When you do this, make sure the tip of each triangle lines up with the other at the top. Now you have this. Put it on and make sure the top is all the way on top of your head. Then mark where your eyes, nose, and chin are. Then draw small circles for the eyes and a triangle for the mouth. Something like this. There should be 1 inch to 2 inches on the bottom. If there's not enough or too much, just trim or add. I also start the triangle above where I marked the nose. Then cut it out. I also save any big scraps to use for later. Now we can start on the snout. Draw the snout shape on paper. Hold it up to the head to make sure it looks right. Depending on what you're making, it'll look different. Cut 2 out of 2-inch foam, then glue them together. Then start carving the edges. Keep in mind what angle you're cutting at to get the shape you want. I start by cutting around the edge. And then I smooth down the top and bottom edge. Once it's carved into the start of your shape, take a piece of paper and mark out the flat part of the piece. Then cut it out of foam, and glue it on. I use those scrap pieces from earlier. Then carve the sides down. Part 2. Carve it into the shape you want, then mark out the inside of the mouth. Like this. Then we can add the nose. This character is a cat, so the nose will look like this. Cut it out of foam, then carve it into shape. Then carve out the mouth. The more carved out the inside is, the better the ventilation. Then glue it to the base. Once that's on, we can make the jaw. Get a piece of paper and draw out the jaw shape. Then cut it out of foam. Then mark out the inside of the jaw, then carve it down a little. Then carve down the edges. I also slope down the back. Then glue it on. Now trace where the eyes go on the head. My eyes I got from Etsy. Then draw the cheek shape. It should look something like this. This part should be right where the eye is, and the smile should be as big as you want. I also add this line. Cut it out of foam. Make sure you add the line that separates the top jaw and bottom jaw. First I cut a diagonal slit along the line. You want the bottom piece to be lower than the top. You want to go from the bottom left corner to the top right, and cut along that line. And you want to carve down the edges. Carve it into whatever shape you're wanting. Once you have that, you can glue it on. I start by gluing it to the snout. Then get a piece like this for the nose bridge, and carve it into shape. Then carve away the extra foam in the mouth. Now we can make the eyebrow piece. Trace out the eye shape, and then make the eyebrow piece around it. Like this. Then carve them into shape. Glue them on, then cut out the eye holes. Then you can carve out the inside. Put it on a few times to make sure it fits right. Part 3. Draw the shape of the ear. Hold it up to the head to make sure it's the shape you want. Also, if you want, draw these side pieces. Cut them out of foam, then cut out these side pieces. Cut them out of foam, then carve down the edges. Once they're carved, glue them to the ear. Then carve down all the edges. Then glue them to the head. Then you want to take a strip of fabric and glue it to the base of the ear. I'm trying something different for this head, but it should usually look like this. If your character has cheek fluff, cut out a shape like this. Cut them out of foam, carve them into shape, then glue them on. Now make sure the eyes fit nicely in the head. If they need to be carved out more, do that. But don't glue the eyes in yet. Also smooth down this back edge. Now start taping the inside for the lining. Make sure you tape the eye and the inside of the mouth. Then mark out all of the pieces. Cut them out, then cut them out of fabric. I'm using a breathable Lycra fabric. Then sew them all together. When doing the mouth pattern, the part that connects to the lining, prioritize keeping that flat. The rest can just be pushed down. Now when cutting out the mouth fabric, cut out a lot more than you need. You can trim this back later. Then sew all the pieces together. Then start gluing the lining in. This is a long process. Part 4. Once you have all the lining glued in, if you're doing teeth, don't glue in the mouth lining all the way. Draw out the teeth shape, then cut it out of fabric. Then sew them together. Sew them, turn them inside out, then stuff them. Then hand sew the top closed. Cut a slit where the teeth go and glue them in. Then mark out where the teeth go, cut a hole, and push the teeth through. Then glue down all the edges. Now for the eyes. I have them drawn out, then sized properly onto paper. I tape my buckram to paper, then I run it through my printer. Make sure you paint the back of the buckram black. Also, I used a Sharpie for that. You can also paint them, but I like doing it this way. Then glue them to the eye blanks. Then glue them onto the head. Make sure you put it on a few times to make sure it fits right. And if you have any overhang on the sides, just add pieces of foam to smooth it out. Then glue on some fabric for the nose. Now you can start taping the head. If your pattern is symmetrical, you can just tape half. Now draw on all the patterns. Then mark any big pieces into sections that will lay flat. Then mark the color, number, and fur direction of each piece. Cut them out, then trace them onto fur. Shave the pieces that need to be shaved, cut them out, then sew them together. Part 5. When sewing the fur together, I do it in 4 different pieces. The face, ears, back of the head, and cheek fluff. Cat. When I do the ears, I don't sew them together all the way so they're easier to glue onto the base. Once it's all sewn, you can start gluing it to the head. Also, I hand sew all of the front of the face because it just looks better for me. Once it's all glued on, you can start ladder stitching everything together. Also, when ladder stitching, I like to use upholstery thread because it won't break when I pull it. Once it's all sewn, we can trim around the eyes. Then trace out the lining of the eye. Then cut them out of felt or fleece, then glue them on. You can also glue down a strip for the nose. Now we can work on the tongue. Draw what the tongue looks like on paper. Then cut it out of fabric and sew it together. Turn it inside out and sew any additional details. I'm using magnets, so I just glue them in. Then hand sew the top closed. Now we can finish it off with the neck. I put it on my headstand, then wrap some batting around it so it's not as tight. Then I wrap some cling wrap around it. Then duct tape it. Then mark your pattern and section it into pieces. Then cut them out. Cut them out of fur, then sew them together. Then you can sew it to the head. Make sure you sew it to the fur and the lining. Now for the hair tuft. Draw out the hair shape. I'm using magnets, so I'll need a bottom piece too. Sew it together, but leave a space open so you can pull it inside out. Glue on a magnet if you're using one, pull it inside out, then stuff it. Ladder stitch the hole closed. And if you're not using magnets, you can just ladder stitch it on. And you're done.